Hey guys, it's Danny. Today it is time for another Q&A session. I will be answering as many questions as I can that you guys left in the comment section of my videos. Now, before we answer the actual questions, I do want to answer one question that keeps coming back over and over again in my videos, and this is, Danny, how do I take care of X orchid? And in many cases, I have never owned that orchid, so I don't know what to tell you from first-hand experience. So the best thing to do is to actually Google it, but I'll tell you how. So let's say that the orchid you're looking for is a species. On the tag, you'll see usually two names, sometimes even more. The first name is written with a capital. The second or third name, they will be written without a capital, a small letter. This is how species are written. Case in which what you need to do is go into Google, put in this name, followed by the name orchid species. The first result will most probably be the orchid species website, which will give you a lot of details regarding the actual environment this orchid comes from in nature. From the details about the location, you can draw the conclusions regarding temperature, light. Sometimes even the orchid species tells you if it's a cool grower or a warm grower, if it takes a dormancy, a winter rest, and so on and so forth. Mind you, always be careful with altitude. It's more important than the actual geographical location. Many orchids come from the equator or near the equator, but at high elevations, over, let's say, 1,500 meters. You just know that that orchid is more of a temperate to cool grower. Also, some orchids can come from the cloud forest, which is very humid. So most probably those orchids don't like to dry out. Anyway, finding out these informations will give you a lot of ideas on how to care for your orchid if you cannot actually find any other information that you trust. And now let's say you're looking for information for a hybrid. If you look on the tag, you'll see that in the case of hybrids, all of the names are written in capitals. In this case, what you need to do is enter this name in Google, of course, followed by the name Blue Nanta. The first result most probably is the Blue Nanta website, which is a really great database for orchid hybrids. And if you click on the link, most probably you will find your orchid and its entire parentage. What you need to do is go all the way to the bottom, find the actual species that went into that hybrid, and then research them with the orchid species website. Some orchids will have a lot of parents. Most importantly, look at the ones that have more input. They have the greater ratio. Typically, the care for the hybrid will be pretty similar to those species. It's not a rule, but here is where you can actually start. I really like these two websites, and afterwards just Google search and see what other articles are saying, what people on forums are saying, and so on and so forth. The greatest tool you have in this hobby is actually Google, and also YouTube if you want to see footage of things. Definitely try to use YouTube search and Google search more, because it can give you a whole bunch of results that me or other people cannot actually give you. There are many orchids, and it's very hard to actually own all of them. The best thing to do is to actually Google search it, because there is a chance many people don't own that orchid. So first of all, I want to start out with two questions regarding the pot size. Christy is asking, how do we know when we need to repot Phalaenopsis orchids? How do we know what size pot we should buy for Phalaenopsis? And also, a different perspective is asking what happens if you use a pot that is too big. So I'm going to couple both of these questions in one answer. I will actually talk more about pot size, and I will show you how to fit it more in a repot me video, which will be maybe the April one, I think. So that will be a more elaborate type of video, and I'll come back with measurements. But to answer to the question now, with Phalaenopsis and most other orchids, we need to repot either when the medium has gone bad, in the case of organic medium, or when the orchid simply does not fit in the pot anymore and starts to grow out of the pot. Of course, with inorganic medium, we only need to repot when the orchid doesn't actually have room in the pot anymore. And the thing to remember is that most epiphytic orchids don't mind being tight in the pot. The problem is, the more roots you have inside the pot, the less medium. So you might actually have to water way too often for your liking. And if you don't have time, the orchid might dehydrate. So when that happens, it is actually time to repot. And of course, course, I personally like to repot all of the new orchids sooner rather than later because I want to have full control of their medium. So for maintenance purposes, Phalaenopsis should be repotted maybe once every 2 to 3 years, depending how the medium breaks down. If you're using inorganic, obviously repotted when the orchid is just a mess of roots and you have issues watering it. And regarding the pot size, choose something that will indeed fit the roots that were inside the pot initially, but leaves a little bit of space for new roots to grow as well. And here we reach the what happens when we offer too big of a pot. Well, depends on the medium. If we're using leca, for example, pot size absolutely does not matter. And this is because leca retains a lot of air pockets. I said it before, it has to do with sphere packing. I'll link you down below to the Wikipedia article. It's a mathematical thing. Won't go into it because we've already talked about it. Leca retains about 30 to 40% empty spaces in between the beads. No matter how much we try to compress it, we will not get rid of these pockets. When we water, of course, some of these pockets will contain some water, but being that they're so big, particularly if leca is actually big, the air pockets will not be filled with water. They will still benefit from the air ventilation, and also the ratio of moisture will be constant throughout the pot. Even here, even here. That's the nature of leca. It is a rough, round material, and because it retains these air pockets, it is desired by many people. When it comes to organic media, things are definitely not the same. Organic media does not have a perfectly round structure. Also, it's not necessarily a hard material. If we have mixtures of bark and sphagnum moss, parts of the medium will be more fluffy, parts will be more rigid. With the composition and degradation, even bark will start to become mushy. So overall, the air pockets in between the pieces of this medium are not really big. Through watering, we are actually clogging all of these air pockets. That is why with organic medium and with some orchids, it is better to let it dry out, just so we clear those air pockets once again. And then we're gonna water it and clog the air pockets again, but the orchids still need that oxygen. So for some organic media and some orchids, the drying out is what introduces oxygen into the pot. With leca, this doesn't happen. Leca always has air. Now, the bigger the pot, the more water it will retain, because this doesn't follow a constant ratio. The pocket size is never identical, and also, especially in the case of moss, the bigger the quantity, the more water it will retain. The more water needs to evaporate, the slower it will evaporate. So pretty much all of those air pockets will be clogged with water for longer. So with organic medium, a too big of a pot can actually maintain those air pockets clogged for longer and can be detrimental for orchids. That is why with organic medium, we typically go for, let's say, more snug pots. Melissa is asking if spiders are good for orchids. I did that video in which I showed you the spider just climbing down from the ceiling. Well, yes, some spiders are good for orchids. The ones that feed on other insects, they pose absolutely no threat to orchids or any other plants. Furthermore, they are actually desirable because they catch all of these gnats that if you have soil in your pots, you will have gnats as well. In my grow space here, I have a lot of jumping spiders, which I find very cute, and from time to time they do make an appearance in my videos. Those spiders are absolutely beneficial. What we don't want to have is spider mites, which is a totally different thing. They're still in the arachnid family, but they don't eat other bugs. They actually eat plants. Those are the ones we don't want. Danielle is saying they recently purchased a cattleya and the seller mentioned that they like to dry out. How does the self-watering work with leca for this plant? Well, it actually has to do with what I said earlier. With cattleyas, I only use leca, nothing else. I am actually doing a few experiments with a few orchids with a combination of moss and leca, but I think this is the perfect example to actually show you. So here I have a lot of leca. Do you see how many air pockets the leca actually retains in between it? And here I have a lot of moss. Now, I did not pack this moss tightly, but you can see that overall the spaces are just not as big as the spaces that the leca holds. So in organic medium, whether it's bark or sphagnum moss or whatever, it is actually a good idea to let orchids dry out slightly, unless you're dealing with an oncidium or masdevallia or other things of the sorts. With cattleyas, definitely they should dry out a little more. With bark, even though the spaces are a little bigger, what happens is the wetter the bark is, the faster it degrades. When bark is degraded, it becomes very soft and mushy, it doesn't hold its integrity, so all of the spaces will be blocked by the mushiness of the bark. So yet again, not in our best interest to keep it always wet. But with leca, we don't have that issue. Leca doesn't decompose, it doesn't become mushy, it will always be a hard sphere which will always retain the same amount of air pockets. And no matter how much water we run through this, unless we totally submerge this pot, we will always have big air pockets. So with leca, it doesn't matter if everything is wet pretty much all of the time, but with organic media, it absolutely matters. Anne is asking about Dendrobium nobilis and how long they actually need to stay in a cold place for the winter rest. Well, just as long as you start to see the little nubbins form. When you see them, you can bring them into the warmth, you can water them a little bit more and just watch the buds grow. A lot of years ago, we had a discussion, I'll link you to it down below, whether the nubbins will transform into keikis if you bring them into warmth and you start to water them. And I was saying back then when I had the little nubbins on my nobilis that this doesn't happen. When the nubbins form, they already know they want to be buds. So bringing them in doesn't affect them. And indeed, that is the case. It has always been the case for the past 6 years, and you can definitely look through my archive to see the nobilis. So from experience, I can tell you that when you see the nubbins across the canes, you can actually bring them into warmth, and the buds will actually form a lot faster in warmer conditions than in lower temperatures. A viewer is saying they have small pink spots on the leaves of their cattleya. If I know what it is, then how to treat it? I think I have an idea what it is. It's just normal pigmentation. We usually call it freckling. As long as it is purple and not brown and black and doesn't extend and make everything around it yellow, then it's absolutely normal pigmentation. Some cattleyas have it more than others. In my experience, the Eclandiae and Eclandiae hybrids, they typically have quite a lot of pigmentation, but they're not the only ones. Sometimes the cattleyas which have dots on their flowers, and particularly the ones that have purple on their flowers, will usually have dots on their leaves as well. It is absolutely normal, and they tend to intensify in brighter light because this is anthocyanin, and amongst other things, it also has a role in protecting the leaf against the UV rays and sun exposure generally. So if they really are pink or purple, as you say, I'm guessing there's nothing to worry about and it's just normal freckling. And PS, cattleyas are not the only ones. Another big group of orchids are the vandas. They usually get freckles as well, at least some hybrids and species. Okay, here's an interesting one that I did see in my comment section sometimes. Soccer Monstret is saying that they are seeing Phalaenopsis orchids in their grocery store. Oh, that was a tongue twister, sorry about that pronunciation. But the thing is, they're planted in water marbles, which makes them skeptical. Oh, I would be skeptical too, don't worry. From what I've read about the water marbles, it seems to release water slowly, and I feel like it might be a suitable option for an orchid since they seem to provide some air pockets for the roots as well. I was just curious what you think. Well, alrighty. I think you mean the spitballs. I'm sorry, I don't know them by any other name. I know them as spitballs. If those are the things they're trying to grow orchids in, well, yeah, they are round. So sphere packing rules should apply? No. Leca is a tough material. It retains the pockets simply because it doesn't compress. Spitballs are not a rigid material. If you do this, they will change their shape. And I believe that due to the weight of the spitballs on the top, I'm sorry I call them like that, but it's just, that's how I know about them. Saying it now sounds very funny. I'm sorry, water marbles. So due to the weight of the ones above, the ones below will start to become more oval than round. And even if they might release water slowly, it doesn't really matter because those air pockets, I believe, are non-existent, depending on the weight. It's not something that sounds appealing to me. But yeah, if you want to try it out and see how it is, be careful with those air pockets. As it is a very wet medium, probably in very warm or dry environments, things will not be so risky. So yeah, I don't know about that. It's a gimmick in my opinion. Try it out, have fun. It's not something you'll probably see in my collection though. Cass is asking if I reuse sphagnum moss, and if I do, what are the limitations? I never use any organic medium, particularly sphagnum moss, which degrades much faster than anything else. with boiling or baking, there is a degree of degradation you will put the medium through. And already if you used it for a while, it is broken down a little bit, and you boiling it or sterilizing it in any way will break it down even more. I personally am not an adept of microwaving because if you've ever had an infestation of ants, you would know that they're not microwavable. Most of the ants, if not all of them, I don't know how they survive it. They might find places where the waves don't hit them, I don't know. But I'm thinking if ants survive microwaving, maybe there are some other creatures which survive microwaving. So to me, microwaving is not a good sterilizing solution, and baking or boiling simply degrades organic medium even more. I tried it actually many years ago, and the result was catastrophic with one of my orchids, which I still have. It's the Jiminy Cricket. I would not reuse organic medium under any circumstance, particularly with other orchids. Jagadish is asking if I would stake Phalaenopsis species in the same way and their primary hybrids. I wouldn't, because they just don't create that beautiful cascade. They only produce a few flowers, most of them. I'm not talking about the Schilleriana. Yes, the Schilleriana, I think you can stake it and have a wonderful cascade, because that orchid in good condition and after many years of care, it will get to an amazing display. Lots of branches, beautiful flowers. Many complex hybrids actually have that gene because of the Schilleriana. So that's the exception. But all of these summer bloomers, the Violacea, the Bellina, all of their primary hybrids, they don't really create a lot of flowers. So there's no need, no point. I personally don't want to. They also do have the tendency to lean forward, even though the light is coming from above here, simply because that's how they grow naturally. Again, the Schilleriana does not have this habit, but all of these summer bloomers in Polychilus subgenus, they all have this tendency to be rather more pendant, and they don't actually produce many flowers at once, the vast majority of them. So I wouldn't stake them. I don't think it will look good, but if you think it will look good, sure, just make sure that the flower spike doesn't break. They tend to have pretty tough flower spikes from the get-go. They're not very flexible. Do you see this? It's already super tough. So I wouldn't try to straighten it in any way. This is how it grew with the light on top. I cannot really do anything about it at this point, but just enjoy it as it is. So that's one of the particularities of the Polychilus. And the last question coming from Arthur, is the staking process just for aesthetics, or can the flower spikes just be left alone? They can absolutely be left alone, and this is what I typically do. For so many years I just had them drooping down, but now, due to how I displayed them with the whole light situation, with the light below them, I decided to stake them. It is purely for aesthetics. In some cases, when you don't have a very heavy pot, the weight of the flowers can actually drag the orchid down. So do be very careful. Use maybe a decorative container made out of terracotta or clay in any way. I have very big pots for my Phalaenopsis. They also have a lot of water in their reservoirs right now because they drink a lot of water due to the flower spikes. So no, they will not fall over. These are 2 kilograms each, actually. They're very heavy. So even if I would let the flower spikes droop down, I wouldn't have issues with fallen Phalaenopsis, I think, but I would have issues with flowers twisting due to the light below them. Can you imagine? They would just grow here and then they would say, oh, light! And they would start to grow towards the light. I had it happen last year. It was horrible. So that's what I'm trying to avoid right now with the staking situation, and I'll see how I like it. You can see I progressed quite a lot with my flower spikes, and now you can actually see them individually, because when they were drooping down, you couldn't really see them because of the foliage. Well, now you see them. Process was very easy because I already trained these flower spikes with the light. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a good display. I hope. Definitely I will not have contorted flower spikes anymore, so that's good, at least that. Alrighty, so that's about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you found this interesting and useful. And you know the drill, like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As and other fun orchid subjects. And if you'd like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on notifications for my channel. Also, if you're interested in my setup and all of these things that I use in my growth space, check the description, I list everything there. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!